like to call to order the Tuesday, September 10th, 2019 meeting of the Park and Recreation Commission for Edina. Janet, could we have a roll call, please?
Yep. Commissioner Osborne? Here. Commissioner Trellis? Lella, sorry.
Lellis, yeah. Here.
Willette? Here. Commissioner Nelson?
Here.
Commissioner Strother?
Here.
Commissioner Darlene?
Here.
Commissioner Good?
Here.
Commissioner McCauley?
Here.
Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Itis? Here.
All right, thank you. First order of business for tonight, could I get a motion to approve our meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions on tonight's agenda? Changes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Passed. Can I get approval for our meeting minutes of August 13th, 2019?
So move.
Second.
Any comments, questions on our meetings, corrections on our meeting minutes from August? Hearing none, all in favor of the meeting minutes from August 13th, 2019, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passed. Community comment. No one in our audience tonight, so I think we will skip past that one. And let's take a moment. We have a new commissioner tonight, our student commissioner, Zoe. If we could just give you a couple minutes to introduce yourself and maybe tell us why you thought the Park and Rec Commission was something that would be exciting to do for a year.
Okay, I'm Zoe Lellis. I'm a senior at Edina High School this year. I moved here about 4 years ago, so I play hockey, so I use the Park and Rec facilities a lot. I worked for Park and Rec during the summer as a playground leader for the past 2 years. I thought it'd be interesting to join the Park and Rec Commission because I'm interested in learning how the Edina government works, and I thought this would be a great way to do that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Welcome. Thank you. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
All right, reports and recommendations. First up, update on the race and equity initiatives. Perry, you're going to lead us through that tonight?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. I'll give you a couple of quick updates and just a little bit of a primer. This evening we had anticipated having another staff member from the city in attendance to kind of go over this as well. Unfortunately, she was unable to be here tonight for this specific, but we're going to reschedule for sure to have her here in October. That will be our goal. So with that, I'll kind of give you maybe a more abbreviated version of that, and we'll kind of just cover a little bit about where staff is headed on the department work plan, because obviously some of those things tie into your commission work plan for 2020 that you have kind of going. So just to kind of see some of those aspects as well. So I'm going to try to put up a presentation. Janet, I'm not sure if you can switch to there we go. Is that it? It is, because I'm going to put up this piece of it. Just to kind of put it up in the screen so it's a little bit there. You don't have to try to pull anything up. But as far as a Parks and Recreation Commission work plan itself, of the multiple action items that you have on your calendar for the year, there are 3 items that are specific to the race and equity action plan that the city has adopted. Of those, a couple of them kind of correlate back and forth to the Park and Recreation Department's work plan. So just to kind of give you a quick update on where the department has been and where we are headed, maybe that'll be a little bit more of a primer then for when Heidi is joining us then in October. So do a quick update there. The first is reviewing the scholarship funding programs, considering and adjusting sliding scale fee structure, staff training on our fund availability to ensure residents are provided with the opportunity to apply for financial assistance. Even prior to my arrival, staff had been working on this and done a lot of the background, contacting additional cities, looking at what other options are out there, what can we do within our registration software system. In the end, kind of the unique piece of what Edina offers that a lot of other communities don't is something called the Connect Card, that allows people to register through multiple different organizations, associations, district, city itself, for programs. That's kind of all backstopped by the Edina Community Foundation. So looking at kind of that sliding scale might not necessarily work for us because it kind of creates confusion on what we offer versus, where our structure would be. So kind of where we're headed on that one is to continue to try to raise awareness of that Connect card rather than try to do something on us. So if we know people only have to qualify once for the Connect card, then we don't have to worry about changing fees, things like that we can always run through, make it easier on the participants themselves to get access to our programs. So, yeah. Go ahead.
I can speak to that.
Yeah.
That's actually two different things. So Edina Give and Go is through the school district, and the Community Foundation runs the Connect card. So it's actually two different things that we accept scholarship based on both of them. Give and Go qualifies as under financial hardship as well. So Give and Go has a little bit different qualifications. So if a family is under financial hardship, they can also qualify for Give and Go, versus the Connect card is different qualifications.
And I'd like to introduce Tiffany Bushland, our recreation supervisor, who's here to join us this evening, who actually did a lot of the work on the background on these topics. So, so she can feel free to jump in at any time on some of these things that we've been working on, going on. So that's kind of where we're headed on that one. Is the big piece there is to look to say, because we have it, let's raise awareness. So,
yeah, and I don't know if this is, maybe we can talk about this in October. My only question is what are the main sources of funding to the Community Foundation for the funding of those scholarships? Are athletic boards, community fundraising, like just out of curiosity, or are those people we need to go back to and talk about some of this in terms of promoting?
I think we can bring more detail back on all of the sources that the Edina Community Foundation receives donations from, and kind of all of their events that they have throughout the year. There's quite a list, so I think we can add that for October for maybe a recap. But they've been very good. I think, it's been nice for us. I think it's fairly easy. We kind of list all the card transactions that we receive, and then we're backstopped by them. So I don't know, do we do it twice a year or just after each registration cycle? The foundation reimbursement.
We just have one acceptance twice a year, for sure one acceptance twice.
Mm-hmm. So the last one we did was almost $7,000, I believe. Yeah, in reimbursements for scholarships that we gave.
And I did notice it was just in this most recent activities booklet that we received, there was an ad, a promotional ad for the Connect card right up in front, right? That was really just asking for any donations from the public. So that's certainly one way that I'm sure they get some of the funding.
So that's that big push. Rather than try these sliding fees or requalifications of households, is to continue to push that so we can kind of have that one stop for anyone in the community. The next one, the creation of a racial equity policy. We're working on that, and we'll continue to update the board. But then within all sports and facilities, provide the policy for organizations using city-owned facilities. That one kind of feeds into the commission's work plan for the bottom one there, 21C, which is review and comment on the race and equity policy statement developed by city staff. And I had mentioned to Commissioner Struthers that we would work together with her and Commissioner Warwick. Brenda? Okay. And Osborne. So we'll continue to feed that, and I think the best base is to kind of meet as a small group and then report back. So let's see. The next one, the employee training covering code of conduct, safety and security procedures, language interpretation services, and cost option. That one we had an idea that staff had proposed to get some additional resources through kind of a partnership grant with the Human Resources Department. Unfortunately, that hit a wall, so we're kind of going to our plan B, which will be to kind of try to create a program on our own for frontline employees. We figure that's kind of our most crucial, is training of frontline staff on these issues. They are kind of the face of the organization. They are the ones in the public. They're the ones interacting. So creating something there. It's always a challenge with the onboarding of seasonal employees because it's kind of a very cyclical cycle. We're trying to get as many lifeguards as possible for the aquatic center. We're trying to get as many staff as possible for this program. And while we do kind of major trainings and onboarding for them, we're continually trying to hire and bring more people on. So those are the kind of that group that we worry the most about, is how do we have a better program for people that are coming in late to the season, halfway through the season. We're bringing them on in the fall. So the developing an alternate way for registering for programs, use of facilities, to reach and welcome new and underserved populations in the committee. That is also kind of one that interacts with the commission itself, with the commission's work on 20B, which is in partnership with the Human Rights Commission for the city of Edina, on kind of understanding that. And I know we'll probably have a short update during the work plan item on that, but that's one that we're also looking at, and kind of had a group go look at that. Also different ways that we can use our registration system. I know our communication staff is even looking at, can we incorporate Google Translate into our software system to see if that is an opportunity to look at language services within it. It's always tough to switch registration softwares, so if there's any way we can avoid doing anything like that at all costs, and what can we do to modify. So I know Debbie in Communications has been working on the Google Translate piece of it. And then the last is reviewing the policy, outlining our requirements of enforcement mechanisms. Tiffany had done a lot of work as well on kind of looking at our agreements for indoor, outdoor, and even some of our association groups like the Figure Skating Club. And we have a bunch of different agreements for each one, and our goal is to get to a point where we kind of have extremely similar language in them all, and then they get specific on what it would be for that association. So, you know, maybe 1 through 3 is specific to that association's use of that facility, indoor or outdoor, and the rest of it is extremely standard across all of it, to have a lot of consistency on what we expect from just outcomes, what we expect from code of conduct, et cetera, whether it's in our facility or not. That's a little bit of a challenging one, because you know, some of them, you know, we have direct relationship with. Some, when you think of like Braemar Ice Arena, they are renting time. So then we also need to rely on either the association or the school district's policies as well. So to make sure, you know, we do have a good code of conduct, as, you know, kind of unofficially, they're kind of the owner for that evening, you know, so we need to ensure that they have something as well that mirrors our goals. So kind of having that conversation around agreements and our city facilities is a little bit of a challenge to ensure we've got that consistency, whether it's hockey or baseball or basketball, depending on what level you are, is really kind of getting to that synergy there between all of them. So I don't know. I know it's a little underwhelming that Heidi's not here to kind of give you the whole background, how the plan was put together, but we really hope to do that when she's available in October.
Okay. Any questions for Perry or Tiffany?
Especially Tiffany. And I would like to thank Tiffany she had headed up a lot of work on that. So,
If not, then we'll look forward to having it back on our agenda in October when our Race and Equity Coordinator, Heidi Lee, is available to cover it again in more detail.
yeah.
All right. Thanks, Perry. Okay, next up, Tiffany. Next up for policy on our use of our pickleball courts. And I believe Tiffany's going to cover that for us tonight.
Good evening, Commission. Thanks for having me. I'm going to present to you on the open play policy that we have put together for the pickleball courts at Roslyn Park. A little bit of background in regards to this. My colleague Nicole Gorman and I have received some complaints over the last, probably the last year, in regards to the pickleball courts. A few of the complaints that we receive is, first of all, people will come to the courts and they'll camp on one court and they won't move for the evening. That's theirs. If you've ever driven by the pickleball courts, you know they are extremely popular. So other players waiting to play are often disappointed if somebody just is camping out in front of one court and calling it theirs for the evening. In addition, we've heard some complaints that people of all skill level don't really feel comfortable playing on the courts. So the courts at Roslyn tend to have a little bit of a stigma that the good players play there. So we want to make sure that these pickleball courts are open to anybody in all skill levels. So Nicole and I headed up some background and some research in regards to what can we do, how can we make people feel more welcome on the courts, and make sure that everybody feels like they have a chance to play pickleball. So we did some research. We reached out to different cities with pickleball courts. A lot of cities are building pickleball courts right now. St. Louis Park just opened some, Hopkins just opened some, Eden Prairie. A lot of cities are building courts. Nobody has a set policy in regards to this. Everybody, when we asked, they said, oh, it's fantastic, let us know what you do. So we're kind of on the forefront of this, in that we want to put a policy forward. We want to tell our residents, we want to tell our community, this is how play is policed at these courts. So we kind of are in the forefront of this. Nicole and I had met with a member of the Southwest Metro Pickleball Association. If you drive by the courts between 8 and noon, Monday through Friday, the Southwest Metro Pickleball Association is there playing. They are very heavy users of the court. And so we presented the policy that you have in front of you today to the Southwest Metro Pickleball Association, and they are very supportive of this. Their whole philosophy is kind of the same of what we're going for, is open and inviting courts. We want people to play the sport. It's a very social sport. We want the courts to be welcoming for everybody. And so we ran this policy by the Southwest Metro Pickleball Club to get their take on it as well. So the general idea behind the policy is that it's a very open play format. In the sports world, it would be similar to basketball open gym. The first 5 on the court are on this team, the next 5 on the court are on this team. And as the game gets over, the next people in the gym rotate in. So it would be very much like open gym basketball versus tennis. Tennis, you have your partner that you're going to play with, you go to a court together. So the goal behind this policy is that it would be very welcome to anybody that would come to the court, because this is a very social sport. And also it'd be welcoming to all skill levels. So the idea behind this is that we'd have good players mixed in with players that are maybe just starting out, making sure that everybody would feel comfortable to play. We have already purchased the pickleball paddle holder. As you can see, one of the things, if all of the courts are busy, you are to place your pickleball paddle in the paddle holder, and then as courts become available, you move forward. So we've purchased the pickleball paddle holder, and it is actually already up at Roslyn Courts in use. So, and then the last thing to mention in regards to this is that we don't foresee in the near future allowing rentals of the courts. Some cities are exploring with this issue currently. We feel that the courts are in such high demand that we don't want to take it away from the general public. The goal behind our policy is to make it more welcome to other people, so allowing private rentals would take away from that. So looking for some feedback in regards to the policy. Any questions that you have about how we came about with, yeah, Pat? Yeah, the rules are not currently posted. So if, taking back your feedback tonight, come with we would have some solid policies in place. We would post them at the court as well as on our website.
So this is our draft language to take forward.
Could you address the last sentence in point number 3? Players waiting for a court cannot skip over a partially filled group ahead of them. Can you put some context to that?
So yeah, if you come with a team of 4, right, you may always want to play with your team of 4, and you can do that, but you can't move. So a total of 4 players would play on a team. If there's 3 individuals that have filled the slots in the paddleball hold, your group of 4 can't jump over them. So you could still always play with your group of 4. You would just have to put your paddles in the organizer as a group of 4, and you couldn't jump in somebody that was a single.
So does the group of 3 then wait for somebody? I mean, how does that work? That's what.
Yep, so the group of 3 would have to wait for another person. So that group of 4 wouldn't get to jump over that group of 3 if they always wanted to play together.
So does that mean the court is then empty until a 4th person comes to play? How does that work then?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be empty because the group that just finished would probably put a paddle right in that spot.
Okay. All right.
So it would go right away.
And secondly, what about, I know there was an issue last year, I heard, through the grapevine that somebody was questioning whether or not the people playing were Edina residents because they wanted the court. So how is that going to be handled, and what is our rule on that?
Yeah, we don't have a rule on who can play on our pickleball courts. They are a park and they are open to anybody. The policy that we would enforce is the policy in front of you. And I should note that this policy is a self-police policy. We are not going to be out there actually making sure that the players follow these rules. It's up to the players to follow the rules and hold each other accountable for that.
You're not leaving your cell phone number underneath that?
I think maybe yours, Greg.
I'll give it to you later. Change the numbers a bit.
I would say those are kind of the issues that we have the most disagreement out over there, and it is, can a group of 4 just stay on there if there isn't another group coming? And I think it is that piece where it is so much different than tennis, but there's a little bit of that we should fill the court with a tennis mentality, where it is we have a group of 3, who's the next person in, kind of like the old open gym style. And if you have 4, then you're just gonna have to wait for the next group to clear off.
And today it really is a developing culture around the play for it. Many of us that are playing are tennis players that kind of go at it with a tennis mindset, and we get 4 or 8 people together and you go and you play for an hour. But the pickleball culture as it was developed is more a social one that you just kind of start rotating through and you play with whomever comes up next. So it will be an adjustment for many players.
Or you wait.
Or you wait. Yeah. Or you go to Minnetonka or Richfield or some of those other courts that are available.
Yeah, we have very visual courts. They are right along the highway.
Yep.
We had thought about putting maps to other.
Yeah. I should mention too
Here's
that
how you get to St. Louis Park.
all of our tennis courts throughout the city are also striped for pickleball. But pickleball players, they tend to like pickleball dedicated courts because they don't have to go as far to get the ball. The fences are a lot shorter. I've played my fair share, and I can attest that is the truth.
I just have one question in terms of the association or organization that's playing, I think you said in the mornings, from, I think you said Minneapolis. I don't know enough about that group, but I'm assuming they're not a league. Is that true?
Correct. They're not a league, and they are, Southwest Metro Pickleball Association, and they use courts throughout the Twin Cities. They are not reserving the court specifically, and they are very open and inviting. They welcome people. They are behind the social aspect of it, and they want people to play. They want to teach people the game. So they're very supportive of this because it allows people to play.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood what that actually was.
Yep.
And I think that it might be, I don't know if we have anything posted at the tennis courts, but I think that might be something to address when we talk about making sure we're consistent in our signings, that maybe we have some form of a policy. Maybe it's different for tennis than it is for pickleball, but I think, and maybe in time, bocce will be just as exciting and people will be lining up that again, something similar, because I would assume bocce would be something similar to this policy, that hopefully we can, kill this same idea with lots of one stone. I'm thinking like if bocce becomes big, and if tennis, maybe we should have some form of signage so people are used to looking for the policy when they go to Edina courts.
And that actually brings up another question. If you have all the tennis courts striped for pickleball, is the pickleball policy only going to be enforced on pickleball only courts, or will that if you have sort of tennis and pickleball competing for space at other courts, how would that work with the tennis pickleball folks?
I believe the tennis courts are only reserved for pickleball on certain days and times, correct? Otherwise, it's kind of tennis has the priority unless it's within this window.
Correct. So at Garden Park, we have set time for pickleball. So it's 4 different days out of the week are set for pickleball, and we have that posted. So pickleball is the priority on those courts at that time. We have not thought about using this policy at other tennis courts throughout the community. I haven't heard complaints personally about that, but you bring up a great point. I think currently the demand is at Roslyn Park.
You talked about I had just 2 things. One was the enforcement policy, and if it's going to be open, then, well, I think they're adults. Hopefully they can figure that out. The one concern I have, and unless I'm misunderstanding how you're saying it is that open gym kind of mentality. And if you get 4 players that it seems that one of the concerns is that you've got people that are really good and are become very good at pickleball, and you've got other people that are just picking up the game, and you're trying to mixing those people together. And the open gym mentality, if you have 4 people that are really good, they continue to stay on the court. Are you kind of cultivating a subset of what some people are complaining about, which is you have people that are really good that are just dominating and keeping on the court, and they're saying they're being exclusive of other folks? Or are we hopeful that that just will police itself as well?
You bring up a fantastic point. And when we originally talked about this policy, we thought, oh, the winners get to stay, because that's usually how open gym works. Within the policy, we indicate that all players rotate off the court. So it doesn't matter if you win or you lose, you are rotating off the court. You're putting your paddle in the pickleball holder because, like you said, we didn't want to have that mindset of, oh, these 4 get to stay on because they're so good.
So do they play to a certain score and then that's the end of the game? Okay.
Correct. Yep. They play 1 game to 11 and then they're off.
Which takes how long?
If you've got really good teams and some good volleys, I mean, could take about 20 minutes maybe.
So if I play, it take 5 minutes?
I don't know. Depends on who you're playing.
Yeah, that's right.
They're not lit.
It'll get dark. We don't have lights yet. We don't have to work on that, Mike.
And the paddle holder, because it is one person essentially coming on, is this paddle holder like 20 high or something?
I think the one that we purchased is.
Well, I don't know, you probably fit 8
Oh,
to
I
10
think
maybe?
it's a little more than that.
Is it a little more than
Yeah.
Often they have like groups of 4 paddles that you can
Yeah.
put side by side. So,
Yep.
Yep.
you're not usually seeing more players than 8 or 12 that are waiting for a court.
And then it would be a paddle holder per court?
Yes, right? Per
So-
court with 4 per court? Is that the way
No,
you've
it's
got it set up?
just one paddle holder, and then whatever court opens up first that's where
Just the first one,
Yep.
and then it moves up and moves up. Yep. Yep. So it's a priority kind of order.
And because I try to anticipate the bad parts of this, is there going to be in the policy laid out that each person is allowed to have 1 paddle they use in the paddle holder, so that you don't have, I mean, I think of when I was a kid and I put like 40 quarters up on the Pac-Man machine. So are we going to make it so that you have just 1 paddle so that you can't kind of squat and always be going on because your paddle's up next?
I think we could probably clarify
Yeah.
that in the
So we need to
policy.
ban Matt from pickleball courts.
Put his picture above the paddle holders if you see this man.
Point number 7.
Other questions? I had a couple for you, Tiffany. One, you did say you've kind of discussed this with other communities. I had heard, I thought that maybe Chanhassen on their courts had something that was posted sometime last year. I don't know if that was one that you got a hold of or not, but you might check on them.
Let me see what I have in regards to Chanhassen. We did reach out to Chanhassen. They provide indoor space for their players as well. So what the recreation supervisor in Chanhassen informed Nicole and I of is that they also have the paddle organizer, and then depending upon how many people are waiting to play, they'll also let the winners stay. So if there's not many people waiting to play, they'll let the winners stay on the court. But I don't have anything in regards to exact signage about what they would have.
I know you said you were being responsive to complaints. Were you able to do any broader surveying of players on the courts to see if they have any reaction to something like this? Or
You know, we have a lot of city staff that are playing pickleball.
Yeah.
So we actually did run this by a wide variety of city staff that play not only in Roslyn, but play in their own communities as well.
Yeah.
So we did use some other players and ran this by them.
Okay. And we might also think about, if this is indeed a direction we go, something that kind of builds some awareness, educates people on the policy, so they don't, not seeing it when they show up with 8 players expecting to play for 2 hours, right? And they say, oh, I guess we can't do that here.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And just thinking too about what you said about garden, I wonder if there's an opportunity, and maybe we just let this play out for a while, to make certain days or times open play and certain days or times where you can kind of feel like you could be on a court with a group of 4 or a group of 8 for some period of time. But I can understand kind of going this direction, at least to allow people more time on the courts. I think ultimately, to me, it says we've got a supply-demand issue of pickleball courts, right? And we got to get ourselves lined up to find a way to put some more courts in the community. Because as you said, they're going up all around us, and we've got a demand-supply situation with the ones we've got.
Yeah, and jumping on that, Greg, with the utilization stuff we're doing, it might make sense because, you know, I go by that garden park. I live not too far from there, and sometimes there's tennis players, but I'm just wondering when we start talking about, I remember one of the things that was in the Braemar master plan at one point was pickleball courts, or maybe it was the snow tennis, the platform tennis. But I think there's been pickleball courts in a couple of different places. It's almost like, do we need to look at an alternative, since there is a lot of demand for this at some of the courts? There's tennis courts, a lot of tennis courts across the Edina area. Is there an opportunity to retrofit some of those, put some fencing in to make it more pickleball centric, and, you know, and do that? So that would be something maybe we should add on.
And exactly on that point too, Matt, the ones that might be interesting to just observe or study would be the traditional Creek Valley tennis courts, right? So now that we've got a whole set of other tennis courts, clearly the tennis team uses them for some period of time. But are they just locked for school use? Oh, okay. Because I haven't seen many people in the Creek Valley courts, and it's funny, I've walked down those other courts, and so they must lock them maybe when they hit tennis season.
Yeah. Those courts, as far as I know, are only to be used by school and school staff. So there's a lock. So those courts are not open to the public.
Weren't they built with public dollars? They weren't. Where do those dollars come from? Public. I hadn't heard that before, and I'd walked on that court without it being locked. I would have a problem with that personally, but okay. Because I was thinking of those courts are there, and if they're empty, tennis players could be on that, and we might have 2 Creek Valley tennis courts we could retrofit to pickleball.
And just to be clear, that could change. I know that was right now. You know, some of these things aren't in force going forward, and they may find that locking it is not as big of a deal. The old high school courts that were behind the stadium at Coleman, you can get on those all the time. Maybe when they were built, they were originally locked and used for the schools. I just know that when Creek Valley opened, those courts opened originally, just the 2 tennis coaches had access, and the janitorial staff at Creek Valley had access to get into the courts. They might be open now, but that was the original intent.
Well, we're not on the school board, so I guess we won't address that
I was going to say,
tonight.
Chair, we could actually make an inquiry
Yeah.
to see with the district if they have a policy on locking their courts or keeping them open to the public, or what their stance is.
Yeah, that'd be good to know, because we do talk about sharing fields, courts, et cetera, across the school district and the city, and so
Yeah, it might be an awareness
interesting to know
issue that
where we
they're not aware that
limit it
there's
and where we
a
don't.
high demand. I think, the other piece that we looked at also is trying to maybe look at some type of ambassador program, because I know a number of the courts, a lot of the equipment is locked up in boxes that we need to put out, and so expanding maybe that possibility of having additional volunteers that are kind of qualified and backgrounded to be able to put things out in our park system so they can use them on more tennis courts. We currently do it, we have a volunteer that sets them up in the mornings, but I know that works only for certain people's schedules, so if there's a way we could kind of maybe expand volunteers to do that in the afternoons or weekends or something to kind of maximize some of the folks that maybe don't want to go to Roslyn because they want to maybe work on their skills prior to heading to there, because it does feel there is that stigma that that's a little bit more of a competitive court system.
Yep. Okay. We have heard some inputs on this one. Tiffany, you've got enough inputs to kind of craft this if you need to anymore, and I guess the plan is to go ahead and publish this and work with it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Edinburgh Park Entrance Project. Perry, you going to cover that for
we'll
us
cycle
tonight?
through this one. So as you know, Edinburgh Park, kind of located in the southeast of the city. We have a funded capital improvement program that we want to get your input on. So just to give a little bit of background, this is, and I'll cycle through exactly where this is, or for those watching at home. But the biggest thing we need to do through this project is make improvements to correct the stormwater drainage that's impacting the facility. So we've also got to make some repairs to the footings because of this issues. We got to reconstruct stairs, replace railings. But at the same time, we're also looking at that as, can we incorporate anything from aesthetics, branding, or wayfinding into the project? And that's kind of that area we really want to get your input on to bring that forward. So We want to get that feedback on these aesthetics, entrance improvements. Biggest thing's not showing up, but Edinburgh located basically in the southeast portion of Edina. For those of you that have been there, this is the south entrance. So basically there are two entrances, one off of York, the other one off of Edinburgh Way. This is that one kind of on the parking ramp side off of Edinburgh Way. Let's see, so right there. So a little bit of a zoom in on the left. This is kind of the area we're looking at. It's not large. It's not a large area, but that plaza itself, we take a tremendous amount of stormwater there from multiple roof locations. It all ends up on that plaza. Because of the drainage issues, we're actually getting water that sometimes is coming into the front foyer of those doors. In the winter, we've got pooling and ice conditions. When we get heavy events like we have been recently, it's running down the walls, down the stairs. It's actually quite deteriorated on the side of things. It's still, we're at the point where we're not concerned structurally yet, but that's why we're doing this project. So we've got to make repairs to the brick and the tuck pointing on the loading dock side, and all that will be within this project scope. But this project, because we are kind of having opportunity here, our next steps, as I'll describe, we're going to head to the city council for kind of like a sketch plan review on that. But we wanted to get your input because a while back, this actually had gone to the Arts and Culture Commission for an opportunity for public art. And kind of the feedback that came out of that is, could we do something within this entry plaza to kind of help you ground yourself that you are entering Edinburgh from this entrance? What other things could you do there? So this was kind of the initial plan that had come up. It's been updated a little bit since we've been there, but I'll just kind of walk you through a little bit. So right now, to help collect all that water, all of this will be taken out. So we'll kind of have a clean slate heading into this project. To the top half of the screen, which would be the eastern direction of the entrance, we'll be adding in this area limestone seating wall. Behind it will be some landscaping aspects of it. The same on the bottom half of your screen, which would be the western portion of the entrance. Small seating wall, landscaping area, mulching beds. Within those two, on the top of the screen and the bottom of the screen, were ideas for play equipment. And specifically in this plan, it kind of got to musical. Could there be, kind of if you think a little bit like Roslyn Park's play equipment, if you've been there recently, with kind of xylophone, but this would have maybe, a musical instrument like a drum, bells, etc., kind of on that area, or some talk tubes to go back and forth. The existing surfacing would be removed, as I indicated. That could be put back with more of a graphic or wayfinding, to getting into this facility. The center area itself, currently right now, that's a landscaping bed. Could be removed with some type of, initially the thought was, do you want to put some type of play equipment there? I'll show you the next screen of maybe a different reiteration of that. To put in there, that would be where everything would slope, and trench drains would pick up all that water and take it to the lower level to the stormwater system. So we kind of want to protect that integrity of the stormwater system in that area, as well as then kind of moving it down, additional landscaping to help slow some additional runoff that's coming off the steps, etc. So the first iteration of this plan kind of had a center area that maybe had some things for kids to climb on, a small slide. That has been kind of updated a little bit of something, maybe a little bit more public art that people could interact with, that necessarily wouldn't be something that they would want to play on for long. Our initial thought was, from maybe a branding standpoint, having something here where kids could get a picture taken. Maybe it would say Edinburgh on it. We were kind of looking something, if you've been to the promenade or the promenade of Centennial Lakes, the EDNA, where kids can stand in the eye and take their photo, is what could we capture here that families would want to put out on social media that could possibly attract, someone's there, that's interesting, we want to go there. So our initial thought was a kind of, something with a concrete sculpture in the center. Trees is kind of that piece of the branding for Edinburgh Park, for doing something there. So this is kind of where the Arts and Culture Commission kind of went. Staff right now, we're working on primarily the construction documents of it, maybe that major piece of all the stormwater, all the brickwork and concrete work. And this would be kind of that next piece of get some feedback from the Parks Commission this evening. Where do we head for including something like this, or what your thoughts are? And then our next step would be then to kind of take that feedback to the city council and then hopefully take that out further. So we kind of wanted to head to a sketch plan with the council to kind of give them your feedback, kind of all that stuff, incorporate that. Eventually we have to have some stakeholder meetings out there because this is going to be a pretty big project for the chamber, for all the other groups that office out of there. We've got additional tenants out there, hotel, things like that. Get to final design, actually get a project out for bid. The good news is we do have project funding, and I think when we listed this, it was last on kind of that, because really from a priority standpoint, we want to make sure we do the infrastructure right, and say then kind of what is our next step here. And then we really want to, get a plan out and communicated. Our goal would be to do this next summer, which would be our low season at Edinburgh out there. So,
Perry, maybe just open one clarifying question. Where's the funding coming from? And do we have a sense for what the different cost buckets are, the maintenance improvements, the wayfinding, the play area?
Currently, it's funded out of the capital improvement program for the city. So this project actually was identified, I believe, in 2012 or 2013. And an initial study was just to kind of do just what's the extent of it, because they kind of underestimated at that time that this was a much grander project than what they had thought of, just maybe fixing some grades out there. So it was put into the last capital improvement program. We actually have the funding now, but because of the timing of construction, we don't want to go into construction this fall, or we could do some stuff over the winter, but that's our peak season, so we were able to carry that forward and do it next year. As far as where the dollars break down, I don't have that yet. We're roughly only at about 50% drawings on the infrastructure side. The project architects feels that the dollar amount that's allocated is about right. But we haven't broken it down to what would be in each phase. So, in addition to this, I think we've also got some wayfinding that we need to look at as you approach the park. Maybe first-time visitors, not fifth-time visitors, and how to find it. Maybe that's, without having a balloon above or something where you keep getting closer. So.
Questions, comments?
So I don't have an exact answer on the dollar figure for.
I do. I actually have 4. My first thought is I think this is really great, and I think that the structure, having a structure that's not like a slide, I think makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking as a parent, my kids are older now, but you finally get them out of Edinburgh and now they want to play here. I just think that putting a slide there, that makes me have a headache just thinking about it, and my kids aren't going to slide anymore. But so I think that the idea of having a structure is really great from that standpoint. My first question is, during the construction, obviously, even if it's in the downtime, it's still open. Are we going to be able to get people into a different door, or how are? And I guess I should make sure that that's a possibility, that we aren't going to be able closing the door at all. Correct?
The facility will remain open. We'll have to route people to that, kind of call it northeast entrance, where maybe more of the buses drop off. Fortunately, we'll still be able to use the parking lot, but it is going to be quite a walk. So part of our staging and signage plan will be to look at, where do we have accessible parking? How do we route people? What do we do with office tenants? How do we work with them on that? Because our goal would be this entrance itself would be completely shut down. So we'll be routing everyone to the other one. So at least we'll still be able to remain open.
Okay. I think that's important too. I mean, it is, there are lots of days it rains in the summer, and lots of days that people want someplace to go. And those are the days that I think it's craziest there. And I think we just got to figure what that looks like, because also those are the days you're not going to want to walk with your little people that far in the pouring rain. So I just think that that's important. Because when I've been there in the past, and it has been a while since I've been there with kids, those side doors, you could only go in there if you had a certain key. So because there's birthday parties up on that top hill. So I just wanted to make sure that that's a consideration. And then you did mention having a steering committee, and I don't know if there's anybody that's been on point, but I'd be happy to put my name on it to help with this, because this is the first time I've heard of it. Maybe we talked about it last month and I wasn't here, but I feel like this is like the third meeting I've been to in a row that there's like this really cool project going on that we are just now hearing about, and it seems like it's closer to baked than it's a 50%. So I think that another opportunity to bring people in, I'd be happy to put my hand up and help with that, because I do feel like this is a theme, like the third meeting I've been to in a row that I'm like, how did we not know this was going on? I would like to have been a part of it, so I would just like raise my hand and say I can help on that side of it.
And I think, just to add to that, I think part of this is because it hit the Arts Commission first.
Yeah.
Is that right? And then they've kind of done some work on that, and now it's coming to us.
Yeah, so I just want to say, if you want help, I would love to help with that. And my fourth question, just about Edinburgh in general, is, and because I've seen it, I saw it updated once come out, but I haven't seen anything since then, that the pool was closed because it was under, and it said that, I got an email and said it was basically closed until further notice, because there's a lot of work that needed to be done on the pool, but I haven't heard anything come out since then, and I just was curious, and I looked on the website to try to find the answer to my own question, but I couldn't.
You should have got another one that is back open.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Our one-day project turned into a 3-day project. So it was a
Interesting.
filter
The communication said it was like
replacement.
closed indefinitely until the repairs were done, and I was like,
Yep.
curious. Okay. Thank you. That's
I
very
thought
helpful.
all the notices went back out, but maybe we didn't get everyone. But
It could have been my fault too.
And to go back to one of your points is, we're actually at 50% on the infrastructure design. So the aesthetic improvements have only been kind of what you see, the concept or kind of drawing review right here. We've not gotten into any detail yet on what could be out there, more just concept. But as far as the infrastructure, where we're going to take stormwater, the civil engineering, that's where we're progressing on. So,
Other questions, comments?
Because I'm not very good at this. I assume that this rendering that you're showing here is level with the doorway. This isn't excavating down because that parking ramp's right there. Like, we're not looking down into like this is level with what we saw in the actual picture, right? Like where the family's standing here on the right, like that's what you're replacing, right?
that is correct.
Got it, okay.
We will also be doing some work on the lower level where kind of the loading dock is,
Sure.
but it's not represented on that graphic. That's just more out of sight, and that won't have really any aesthetics. It's more utilitarian.
Got it.
On the lower level.
And then the only other question, comment, take it as you would like. I like the tree, and that's kind of neat, but, Edinburgh was built in, 1987-ish, something like that. And, when they named it, it was tying into the Scottish heritage of Edina, Braemar, all of the names and stuff like that in the sister city. I just wonder if there used to be, and maybe member Itis can keep me honest here, there used to be a caricature cartoon that was at Braemar Golf Course. It was a little Scottish guy that golfed, and sometimes I wonder why we can't bring that back, especially if this is something that's for kids and stuff like that. It's a little bit unique. The tree thing we have inside of Edinburgh, would there be an opportunity to do a statue of something like that old cartoony guy that used to golf at Braemar? It's just my thought. I don't know, but something just a little bit different than what we see kind of more common.
Would he be wearing anything under his kilt?
The one at the golf course did not, but
Other questions, comments? Bryn, Zoe, anything on your end? Nothing? I've got a few. I guess I'll look at this, Perry, and break it down into 3 pieces. One is kind of structural maintenance improvements. Yes, absolutely, got to do it, right? And it sounds like that's what you're 50% of the way getting planned through. The second was, to me, the wayfinding and signage. And that sounds pretty interesting as well, because I know a few times I've gone over there, I come through a parking lot and kind of wonder, well, which door am I supposed to go in? Right? So I kind of think that could be a key aspect. And the idea of maybe making a place for art, whether the art looks like this or a wee Scottish golfer or something else, that makes sense. The third, the themed features, I just don't get really excited about. I think that Edinburgh itself is a destination. I think people come there with kids and they want to get inside to get to the park, and when they're done, they're probably like Corin and says experienced, and maybe the kids want to play on something, and the parents say, we've been here for 3 hours, it's time to go. And the time it's being used is when it's raining or when it's freezing outside. And again, I don't know if you're going to have a lot of people who are going to spend a lot of time sitting outside playing on things. So I don't get as excited about the themed features, and would think that as a Park and Rec Commission, we might find other ways to spend some of those capital dollars if they were left over. So, my 2 cents. Anyone else?
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, my one comment would be though, if you are looking at putting public art here, you should assume the kids are going to crawl in it. So.
I agree with you. That is a good
So,
point. Don't make something fragile that the arms could break off, or.
It needs to be something, whether it's something like this, but that the whole point is it's an area for kids to sort of run around and be free and climb. And
Yep.
if you put something like public art there, the kids, they're going to want to hang on it.
No sharp
So-
edges.
Yeah, sharp
Yep.
edges, or just, I like the idea that the Arts Commission took, which is let's do something public art that kids can interact with, even if they're not intended to, you want them inside
Yep.
the building. But I think you'd want to have something that the kids can both look at and touch, not just a look, don't touch.
Like
Nope,
I think
I
of
agree.
the dog that Shelley had done the over here for the K9 memorial. Like I know her personally, but it's like it's a dog that kids can climb on and things like. And then it doesn't have any sharp edges because kids are going to run and they're going to fall and things that are going to happen. So it is good that it has something smooth that that I think it's a good point. That's something artistic and ways to bring it in, but it can't be like the sculptures around the prominent.
One of the things that you don't see here that we brought up to the architects too is it also needs to be accessible. So, as this looks right now, it most likely would not be. So we need to ensure that, that is a piece as well. So if it is where it's a photo place, then we need to make it accessible too.
Yep.
I did assume that on that drawing that it was ADA compliant to get around it for sure too.
To get around it, yes, but
But
like,
it-
if we
on
look
there
at the
as well.
tree,
Yeah.
this would not.
But sometimes the picture kind of looked as different colors. I was reading it's actually different colors of concrete, but
Right.
that I'm assuming that we'll make sure that we better make sure that it's ADA compliant.
Yep.
Let me say.
Which is interesting, we're to fight slope, so we need to make sure it's compliant, but yet we gotta get the water out of there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks, Perry.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, open streets discussion. So our last meeting, we said there was an interest in re-engaging in this year's open streets, which is coming up the third Sunday in September, I believe. So it's approaching.
Yes, Chair, I just kind of made some notes, a little bit about things that those members that are going to attend, that we possibly could display, for you. An additional one that kind of came up this week is I met with the Garden Council, and they are still interested in those that want to donate or fundraise for the Tranquility Garden at Arneson Acres. So if you are interested, they provided multiple donation forms. If you would like to have those available at the booth for those that don't know about that. I did ask if they wanted to come back and provide an update on that project, so maybe we'll schedule that in the future. But they're still on that phase 1 piece of the Tranquility Garden at Arneson Acres. So.
Any other additional materials besides just a donation form?
From the Garden Council,
Yeah.
they have their membership kind of flyer, so that's kind of what they had right now is the donation forms and
Are you
about them
thinking
as a
material
membership.
about the Tranquility Garden that could help people
Right.
understand what it is?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It'd be hard to get
Oh.
people to give money to something that you can't really explain.
I understand. They do, at Arneson, we could bring one of their prints that they have, kind of that shows the layout and what it would look like. So the concept we could have, I thought you meant additional things from the Garden Council, so sorry about that.
So in our packets, as Perry referenced, we had a list of some of the things that we could have to continue to promote. Again, Julie, Brenda, and I were there last year, found people very engaging, very open, sometimes a bit of a surprising direction of topics that they wanted to praise or criticize and talk about. And in today's electronic world, everyone still loves maps, so they wanted maps. But if we're all still looking at these and saying they make sense, unless there's something else besides the Tranquility Garden, I might look for folks that would have an interest in participating. I know I can do it again, so if there are others that want to jump on that, and I see it's actually the 22nd, so I guess that makes it actually the 4th Sunday of September.
What time does it run?
1 to 5? 1 to 5 is what sticks in my mind.
I'll have to verify. I know one thing on the logistics is we will have a tent, chairs, and tables there for you. We would just need someone to take the Parks and Recreation tablecloth there. So.
Yep. And any materials, yeah, that we
And
could.
materials.
And I think last time, I know I was able to pick up some of that, so I'm sure we could figure that out to make sure we get it there on.
Mm-hmm. I'll look up the exact time.
Okay.
I'm available. I have a small car and I'm not available to
To haul
shuttle-
things.
shuttle things,
Yeah.
but I'm available to help
Okay.
at the table.
Any others interested?
I can help.
So,
Mike, Eileen? Okay.
I'm available.
I'm only
No,
going to go
then-
when you're
Bryn?
available. I have to be there at the same time.
hang on.
So Janet, I think we've got Mike, Eileen, Bryn,
Aren't you playing on
Julie,
that Sunday?
myself.
Oh, no, I can't. Right, he just reminded me. Sorry.
She'll be playing golf, I
It's the
think.
golf tournament Sunday.
Someone's paying for your golf, and so you got to be there. It is the Braemar Golf
Thanks
Tournament,
for
1
the
to 5.
reminder. I didn't have it on my calendar.
Yeah. So scratch Eileen.
Yeah.
She's winning the first
Yep.
inaugural Braemar Golf
Starting my
Championship.
professional career as a golfer.
Perfect. Was Brenda going to be there? Did she say last month, I
I
thought?
don't recall. I'll follow up with her. But that should be good. I mean, we had 3 of us that were able to cover it pretty well last time, so if we have 4 of us, that'd be great.
Yeah, give folks the ability to take a break and walk down.
Yep, and see the sights yourselves, and it does start to spin down a bit by 4 o'clock, so we don't need all of us necessarily there the whole time, but
So we'll plan on having like the latest information at Arden Park and Fred Richards. So.
Can we make sure that the maps we have are the most updated ones? If they have not been printed yet, I think it would be good to, we made some comments and notes on some things that were not correct when we met last. So I don't know if there's any, if they have already been printed, that's awesome. If they
Okay.
haven't been printed, it would be good to make sure that they are up to date.
I'll check with Andrew to see
Yeah, I think
what
last
version
time
they are.
our maps that we had at Open Streets last year were, still said Fred Richards was a golf course. So they'll at least be more up to date than what we had last time.
I think this is the most updated one. I don't know if it has a year on it, but there's some that are printed already.
Like this, that's a good Scottish traditional golf course.
Okay, next up, Parks and Recreation Commission work plan. So we've got 2 phases here. Ultimately, what we want to get to is a list of ideas for our 2020 work plan. I am committed to be presenting those to the City Council on the 1st of October. And so when we finish our discussion tonight, the most important thing for us is to get a list of things that we think are a priority for us to recommend to the City Council. Similar to last year, I think we should be shooting for 4 or 5 things that we prioritized with some verbiage behind it, and then maybe a few things on a parking lot, right? Don't need to have that fully completed tonight. Perry and I will get together. If you will offer us your proxy to shine it up and make sure we've got a working list, we'll take the task to get that ready before the 1st of next month. But before that, just wanted to take a brief update on where we stand for current initiatives, but still spend most of our time thinking about 2020. So any updates on our current list of initiatives on the 2019 work plan that we would want to make a notation on tonight?
Well, so I had a question about that, because if we're making recommendations for things for the 2020 work plan, I know in the past we've often identified things that need to carry over.
Yes.
And so the 2 ones that sort of tie into the human rights work as well have been sort of lingering a little bit as we wait for other work to happen. And I'm wondering if we think those are ones that are going to be able to be wrapped up by the end of the year, or are ones that we are going to have to note will likely continue into next year.
Yeah, I think that's a good addition, Julie, is if folks could just quickly say as well, I think that's going to wrap up, or it's likely to carry over, we should note that as well. So item 1 on our work initiative.
I have not yet heard back from Commissioner Nelson on the, and I can reach out to him again. My guess is that this will continue into 2020, and I have the same kind of question I had at the beginning. I don't know, I mean, if this is a co-lead project, I understand. I think, to me, this feels like one of those things where we need to take some direction from the Human Rights and Relations Commission on what they think is an appropriate way to honor the family, and then to look at, you know, when I see something like we have at Edinburgh, is that an opportunity, instead of having a tree in that middle, is to have a statue of the family or something? And I don't know if that's the right or an appropriate way to do that, but I think we're still kind of at square 1.5, 2, which is we need to find out what they think is the appropriate way to honor this family, and then to find somewhere that would make most sense. And if that's within the parks, then we can be part of that conversation. So I will reach out to Member Nelson again from the Human Rights Relations Commission and find out if they have a recommendation. That's what he was going to take to the floor with them 2 months ago, I think.
Okay.
So just a staff question, or someone who's new. So, like, taking that one for an example, in the past, have these items kind of sunsetted themselves when the commission's work has kind of been done, and it would come back as almost like an agenda item for review?
There's a lot of different ways we can answer that. This item and a couple of other items, and I don't want to speak on other folks' behalf, this one wasn't on our radar when we put our work plan together. We put together a list that was really park-centric and focused, and not to say that this isn't, but this was a work plan item that was then amended and put in our work plan, and we got it when we started the year in 2019. I think there's also things that we've submitted for work plan items, and you heard Member Nelson and Member Struthers talk about, you know, Fred Richards, Edinburgh, where there are things that we talked about, Fred Richards specifically, and we were told to put it in a parking lot, and then all of a sudden, then we were like March or April, they're like, yeah, we're putting a playground there. So there was a little bit of a weird kind of miscommunication, or so. But yeah, there are things that we've sunsetted in the past. I mean, the comprehensive plan work that Greg speared and did very well has sunsetted, and there's been other things in the past. But I mean, that's the goal. I think at the end of our December meeting, this is to say that we've completed this stuff. It's just some of this stuff takes time, and/or when you layer in cross commission stuff, it's just getting people in the room together. So
yeah, I think there are maybe 3 aspects. There are some things that we will complete and call it completed and pass that information back to the city council. There are other things that we might dig into for a few months and then assess this really isn't going anywhere, and we might make a recommendation that we kill it. And then the third is things that we don't get completed and recommend that they carry over into next year's plan. But again, ultimately still the city council that looks at those and says, yeah, keep working on these or not.
Yeah, there's just more of a question of when you think the sub-work group has kind of fulfilled this obligation, but you know it's coming back, and it would maybe just come back on the regular agenda.
Yeah,
for a recommendation to the council.
Specific.
That's kind of the piece that. Yeah,
I mean, specific to this one item, I would think that would probably fall into how you described it, right? I think that we've kind of gotten to this, for lack of a better term, impasse where we just need a recommendation. It was given to us with not a lot of direction. We went back to city council and they said, oh no, any building, any park, any type of, wave, statue, artwork, those types of things, anything is in play, just come up with a recommendation. And we felt, and Member Osborne was there with us, was that we went to the Human Rights and Relations Commission and said, I don't think we are able to speak on behalf of, what the true, essence or the feeling behind why they wanted to have this family honored. And so we're just kind of waiting to hope to get a recommendation from them. So specific to that one, it probably is what you just described, where it's kind of like, what do we kind of done what we've done, and
right.
Until you say we want to do a widget and we want it in a park, then okay, then we can probably re-engage and say, all right, so this is the opportunities we have in different park areas. Or
okay, that helps me just going through it.
Initiative number 2, any update on that one? We touched on it briefly in the race and equity discussion, but partnership with communities of color to identify barriers for participation in programming.
So Commissioner Osborne and I met with a couple of folks from the Human Rights Relations Council, and we came up with a proposal. I think it's in the hands of the Human Rights Relations Commission now to sort of decide whether or not that's the direction they want to go. And but this one's a little harder because it feels like if they agree that this is the direction we want to go, my hope at least is that we're still pretty involved in executing it, because it is about the parks exclusively, right? About the use of both our enterprise facilities and our parks in the community.
And we had potentially talked about incorporating something from that into our open streets display, but nothing has, come up since our meeting.
In speaking with Heidi, it will come back, but right now her charge is to have to work with the HRRC to say, let's get granular. How does this work? What are the means of communication? What does it look like to invite? What is the structure of that open house? So to really kind of say, from that standpoint, from a race and equity lens, how do we actually do this? It's more than just we're going to have an open house and hope people show up. So that's kind of that step in there. But then we did talk about it has to involve going forward the commission.
So I guess my feeling on this one, and I'm interested in Commissioner Osborne's opinion because she was in all of these discussions, but it feels like there might still be work to do on this, because they could come back and decide that this isn't an effective way to engage communities of color, and we're sort of back at I feel like we haven't gotten to the place where we've agreed even on a plan, and maybe I'm not reading that correctly, but we put forward a plan. We're hoping that is the plan that everybody agrees is the direction to go, and then it'll come back to us for execution, but it feels like we are sort of in the middle of this one right now.
Yeah, I felt that too.
A little too circular.
Well, we're waiting for it to come back, because once it comes back and we have a full circle, I'll actually feel a little bit better about it. But I feel like we made good progress, but we're still sort of in the middle.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think this is an example, and we've noted this in previous months, where the concept of the cross-commission work efforts is a good concept. We haven't done it before, this intentionally, and it just feels like we're still kind of in the midst of some growing pains on how do we make that effective. And so it ends up being a bit circular of, well, we looked at it and we passed it off to you, and you passed it back to us, and we passed it back to you. And so we need to keep working on that in the next year, probably. And this may also fit, Perry, from your question of, I might see this as if it gets done and presented to the city council, maybe it ends up as being a department work item rather than a commission work item. Okay, this is what we want, go execute, right? But we'll have to kind of see what happens. Initiative number 3, wayfinding for the Edina Grand Rounds. Corin?
Yep, so I can speak to that one. So similarly to now I wouldn't say that circular
Not as much on this
not so
one,
much,
right?
but it is very hard to get find time on the calendar for just our own group, let alone adding in other people. So I think that is where the biggest part of it is. But in doing so, we have been able to do some remotely as well. And I think it has been an eye-opening experience, especially for maybe just for myself. But I think it'd be good for us to have other commissions come to our own meetings and just give us an update on what they're doing, because I think that a lot of the work that we wanted to do here is being handled in different ways by the transportation group. So I think we are at a place that we could almost get ready to hand over and give it back to them. But I think it would be important to have them come and communicate and say, here's the plans or what we're planning on doing. So our first idea was, how do we look at ways we can improve the communication on the website around what the parks actually offer? They have an iteration right now that's already working on finishing that, and it should be updated soon. We looked at updating the maps to include all the bike trails, walking trails, where there's and then look and say, here's places we think we need to have those. They already have a plan for that. So I think the biggest opportunity was, hey, where we can add some minor signage, but they have a kind of a plan for that too. So I think that the biggest opportunity is just for us to share amongst other commissions on what we're working on and what they're working on. Not just saying, let's get together and try to do it together, but they may already have solutions to some of the things we've addressed. So I think I talked to Gregory before here. I think the biggest opportunity is before we put this one in and tie a ribbon around it is to say, let's have everybody here, listen to what they have proposed and do we feel like this is a place that we can take our hands out of it, or do we think that there's another more work that we need to be doing in there?
But likely something that we could get wrapped up this year so it doesn't become a carryover.
Absolutely. I do not think this should be carried over. If this is carried over from that is because we cannot get a meeting scheduled. So this should be able to be put to bed.
Okay.
When you talked about having an update, would it make sense to invite the staff liaison to give an update too, if accessibility?
Yeah, I think it would be Andrew would be the person we would want to have.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so can I hand that to you to invite him?
Sure.
Okay. I can email him otherwise, but.
Okay, thanks, Corin. Initiative number 4, study and report on fields, courts, rinks. I own the ball on this one. Have not moved it forward the past month. We have all the data collected on it and just need to get our small team to take a look at that and see if we can turn this into some kind of insight that we can then make a recommendation or some statements on going forward. So I believe we should be able to get this one wrapped up, though, this calendar year, so it should not be a carryover to next year. Initiative number 5, alternative funding options. Mike or Rick?
Yep. So, again, just for everybody's clarification, kind of looking at 2 funding opportunities, one being external charitable giving, one being internal generation of more funds. The external one we'll set aside. The internal one, we're looking at can we leverage the assets that we currently have to generate more revenue. We've met with an outside group that actually does this. I guess there's a business for everything. And then came away from that meeting, and Eileen then met with Scott to see if what he thought of the idea and if he had any data to help out and direct us. And he thought it was a great idea to move along, so and did give us some direction, which we then went back to the group with, and they should be coming in the next couple days with what they think they can do for us, and what kind of outcome document that they can give us within our ability and our structure to see if we've got anything to work with or not, to see if it makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, we can set that aside. If it does make sense, then we would move on to a phase 2, which would be identifying how to go about monetizing, I guess, those assets.
Okay.
So we should see that this week, and then we'll talk about that, and then meet with Scott, and then that should be all within the next couple weeks. So
would you say it feels like something we should be able to get to a decision point by the end of the calendar year?
I think for the internal
or recommendation. The internal, yes. The external might still.
The external charitable funding thing it's a little more vague, and we've got to do a little work on that. So,
okay.
I don't know how to. It could go into next year.
Yeah. To be continued.
The external part, I think, for sure.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Initiative number 6, we kind of touched on earlier, review and comment on race and equity policies. So that one sounds like it's a carryover into at least October.
Yeah, at least October. And it seems like once we have the policy, it should be, there will be time they'll have to spend on it, but if we get the policy within the year, it feels like we should be able to review and comment on it within the year.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to finish that one up this year.
Okay. And then initiative number 7 was another cross-commission committee looking at requirements for Edina to receive the AARP city designation.
Yep, and we have a meeting tomorrow, actually. So one day late to be able to give you guys an update, but we do have a meeting tomorrow. I can include you on there. You look like you're excited.
No, I was just going to say I had tried to connect and wasn't able to.
So there
I'm
is a
glad-
meeting. There is a meeting scheduled for tomorrow, and there
better.
actually is a call-in number they've created as well. So that actually gives me high hopes that we'll actually have something come out of it. So I will be there either on the phone or if not in person. So I can send an update after that. So hopefully we'll know more. They are really the driver. We are kind of the rider on this one. So I can't speak to anything about timing.
Okay. Good. Thanks, Corin. All right, so that wraps up everything for an updates on this calendar year. So now let's kind of shift gears and be forward thinking into 2020. A couple things in the packet that you had. We did have some of the high-level concepts that we discussed and brought up from our meeting in August. And at least from my perspective, I also tried to think about the framework that Perry had suggested for us around what could we do, what should we do, and then ultimately what will we do in 2020. So I'm going to just kind of pause at this point and ask for some thoughts and inputs from others around, if you think about that kind of a framework and some of the content we've been provided, which was a recap of our strategy, the comprehensive plan, implementation. There's a lot of content out there for us to pull from, as well as just some of the things that we just have built a passion around as a commission that we would want to offer up to the council as what we think are strong priorities for us to be working on next year.
You know, Greg, I don't know that we have it in here, and I'm hoping that there's somebody on staff that has a priority list and a plan of when it's going to happen, but I guess I would like some visibility, if not already a project, of understanding what we're going to do in terms of this maintenance and the upkeep of existing playgrounds. There's a huge 1996 referendum that passed that created all these beautiful playgrounds, but I graduated high school that year, and I know it's over 20 years, so I know that's had the warranty on them. So I know there's some maintenance that's happened, and hopefully upkeep for safety purposes, but I think it's important that we call it out there. I think a lot of people ask about it, and I think people want to know when's the next one being redone, but I think there was a lot done in 96, and not a lot are going to be done at one time, but I think that we need to have some form of a plan or a communication, or even if it's on the website that just says, hey, here's what's coming. We are aware that we have a lot we need to redo. I think that, I don't know that it's a plan, but it feels like it's something that's needed to be out there.
Yep, I had that as well. It's a good one. Others?
Well, I had the Braemar master plan. I think that was going to come back around.
Yep.
I mean, they didn't do anything this year, so it feels like they need to start doing something over there again. So if it's the bike trails and those types of things. The one thing that I've heard a couple of different ways is maybe more formalizing around the dog parks in terms of some of the infrastructure. We had a request for a water fountain. We've had a request that it's just some fencing. So is there some designation and some other things in terms of budget that needs to go into kind of creating a more formal dog park? I know that Weber Woods is like an informal dog park, and that's another thing that's out there. And then the last thing is that if it hasn't been proposed, or I've heard some rumblings that there's going to be a proposal for the Grandview site that's going to be put in front of the city council, and it sounds like it's going to be again with some park requirements or park wants in it. So I'd like to understand what our responsibilities are, because going back to my first year on the council, that was one of the things that was on there, and there was like a 2x2 piece of grass, and that was considered a park, and so I didn't know what that meant. So just to make sure that we have a firm understanding, so that if that does come as a work plan item as directed by the city council, that we have some firm kind of operating guidelines around what it is really what they're looking for us to do if they're going to move forward on a proposal for the Grandview area.
Okay, thanks. Others?
I think the other one that I always want to have on here, but is, I think Mike mentioned it already, is Fred Richards. Like, well, what are we going to really do?
Yep.
So now we have a playground, and I know that it's funding, but like, we spent a lot of money in creating these plans. We spent a lot of time and a lot of everyone get their feedback, and some people didn't like it, but we spent a lot of money in terms of we could have not spent that money and updated a playground if that we were never going to put money towards it. So I feel like we should use our money more wisely than having, because now I feel like if we're actually going to do it, we're going to start from scratch, because a lot of that stuff is going to be, maybe not, but a lot of it will be, things are going to have changed, things are going to be, things are going to be different. The neighbors will have moved out and changed by then, and so they'll have different concerns. So I just think that, I think it's important that we just understand what's going on there, because I think it was the money, and I think we were kind of also, there was a lot of angry neighbors, and we kind of just skirted it too. So I just would like to understand what we're going to do with that beautiful amount of property there that is still sitting.
There's always a risk of someone saying, well, gee, that master plan's 5 years old, we need to update it, right? Yep.
So
Hopefully not too.
it seems like everything we're talking about involves some kind of funding,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's necessary. Is it, I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but is it appropriate to maybe propose on the work plan in working with staff that we investigate whether or not we should put a referendum out in 2020 to get these projects done? Because we just don't have the funding. I mean, we don't have a budget, and the funding is not there for a move at Fred Richards and all the playgrounds and everything else. And we did it in 1996. But is that an appropriate item for the work plan? I don't know.
Well, I would even go a step further and say, if we don't have the funding, then how can we get it, which I think we're talking about. But then the other piece is that, do we have the funding, and we just are in an allocation situation where you and the Park and Rec Department aren't getting the proper allocation. So, you know, in my head, when we go back to the Edinburgh thing, it's like, we've got this funding, and I'm sure there's probably, you know, there's reasons why we're able to do that in budgeting, and you're under budget and stuff like that. But it feels like, at least in my experience thus far, is that Parks and Recs are one of the things that is last on the list when it comes to funding, when we know that the city has, there might be some debt issues, maybe, I don't know, but it seems like you budget, and it's one of the last things to get budget. But when you talk to people about why they come to this community, parks is probably one of the top 3 things that they always talk about. So safety, schools, and parks. And it would seem that we would want to maintain those, or at least present beautiful parks and accessible parks and usable parks.
Yeah, and just maybe to ensure we keep some balance as well, because I have a similar sense when I look forward and think about the list of things we've worked on, and it's awaiting funding. But I also have to honestly say, we can look back and say, well, we have a new par 3 at Braemar. We have a new championship golf course at Braemar. We're about to open up a new Arden Park. So there are some things. We got new signage in across all of our parks. So there certainly are some things where we've been spending money, but we are building a queue of other things that we keep saying important. And I agree with the concept of, it would be nice if we could say important, and yes, there's funding tied to it. And so I absolutely agree with that aspect. But I want us at least to be balanced on recognizing that we spent a chunk of money on some of our parks over the last 3-4 years as well.
I think the only thing I was pushing back on is that the council has pushed us. So this is my 6th year. Every year, five or six, every single time that we've done this, I always bring up, can we talk about the existing parks, and it always gets pushed out. Yep. And since then, I've been on the Grandview project 3 times, and we spent oodles of money 3 times on planning. I'm like, that is a playground, that one's a playground, and that's another playground that we could have helped done. So it's like, and I heard Grandview come up again, and I will try really hard not to flip my lid, because I just feel like it's a cyclical, and it's like we could use that money and that time on something that's actually going to be able to be used by our residents, and they can use it for the next 3 years while we continue talking about the same thing. And I just think that that's where it's like, what can we do that we can actually help our core parks versus planning to plan? I just feel like we do so much planning to plan that I guess it's just exhausting to me. And I want to be able to, I love it when we created those signs, and I love those signs that I drive, and I love those signs, and we did work hard on them. I feel the same way about Roslyn Park. I love Roslyn Park, but those are things we've actually achieved. But the things that Grandview, that just makes me so frustrated that we spend money and that we are not able to put a bow on it. So I feel like, let's put things on our things that are attainable, that we aren't just going to talk about to talk about. So, sorry, I will.
I was worried you were going to put the pencil through your forehead when you heard Grandview.
I'll put it through Grandview. Put my name on that.
Others? What else?
Are we gonna, sorry, this is a question. I saw there was an article in the Sun Current this week about the water at Highlands. Is that something that's gonna come our way? I mean, if we're jotting down notes, that would be something that I'd want to understand our responsibility, since that is parkland as well.
Yeah, I think I mentioned in an email earlier to the commission when that had come before the city council as kind of a resident petition. I think at this point it's too early to tell. Right now it's mainly a water quality, stormwater capacity type issue that's impacting residential property and a little bit on the parkland itself. So I think as we move forward with what a study of the hydrology says, I think we'll have a better understanding of whether that's a project, whether that's in engineering's court, whether that does impact the park system or not. I think it'll be just kind of keep informed all the way along to see where that heads. As of right now, I can't tell you if that's going to be a project or not. So I think it's a little bit too early to tell, but I think it's good to just keep in our mind that it's something that we've now begun to work on in addition.
Rick, anything from your perspective we're missing? Got it covered? Yeah.
I would just second the Commissioner Nelson's piece about the parks and the replacement plan, because I know that there is something that we've identified in the city about sort of how old certain parks are and what ones are priority. But again, we don't have funding for a lot of those. And I also don't know if the public understands the need and the which ones are the priority. But because it seems like we've taken them up, at least recently, on more of an ad hoc as part of other projects, and not talked intentionally about, can we pluck some of those priority ones off and get something done on them.
Yep. Pat, anything we're missing from your perspective? Bryn, Zoe?
I'm not sure what format it would take, but I know we've been discussing the natural buffer zones throughout the city, like at Lake Cornelia. If we could have something on the work plan potentially discussing where in Edina those changes would be taking place, if they're going to happen, just something surrounding the natural buffer and the addition of like natural grasses and things like that to green spaces.
Yep. Good. Well, I had a list coming in, and I think we've touched on a lot of them. But first off on my list, that Corin, following right up on what you said, I said fund all approved projects and initiatives. I mean, right, somewhere we have to get to the brass tacks of get them funded. Commit to upgrading playground, warming house assets, prioritize and take action on key connectivity and maintenance items, review our commitment and execution to our goal of 15% of land in parks and green spaces. So that's something out of our comp plan. Proactively assess conditions, quality, and sustainability of parks, waterways, and green space. Add trails. In our comp plan, we have a goal of 15 to 20 miles over the next 10 years. Proactively connect with neighborhood groups, developing nodes, and community athletic groups. To what degree at our level should we be doing more of that? Support enterprise asset managers with strategic and operational plans, and develop and recommend an innovative approach to expand funding and operating and improve our park system. So I think most of those we touched on some of the other suggestions. So unless there's anything else on this list, what I would suggest is that Perry and I will take this full list, kind of comb through it, do a quick cut at polishing and prioritizing the top 4 or 5 and some parking lot items. Send it back if we can very quickly via email to see if as a group we can get any last things that we missed or any objections, but to have something ready for me to present on the 1st of October, which will be unfortunately before we can meet again. So
We'll have to be careful on open meeting law with that.
Yep.
But we'll figure out a way where
that we
people
can
could
do it.
individually reply to me, and
Yep.
I can compile feedback or something like that. But,
Right, just send it back and
we'll figure that out. And I think, there'll be a number of initiatives too that we can do to help support some of these. I know we've talked about having, a better presentation on the process of the capital improvement program and how that works, how it ties into the greater budget goals. So kind of also a little bit back to the educational piece that you kind of brought up about, if if we're fully informed, then how do we fully inform neighborhood groups or residents? I think that goes a long way, but.
Yep. Okay, good. Thank you all for those inputs, and we'll get that wrapped up here in the month of September. Next section, chair and member comments. Comments from anyone from the last month? Anything to bring to the table?
Stop the rain.
3 to 5 inches in the next 48 hours. Yeah. I had a few just from some observations. I know Eileen and Rick noted that they were also at Fall into the Arts Festival at Centennial Lakes. At least Saturday seemed like a good day. I don't know, Sunday, unfortunately, probably not as much, but as I was told, 240 plus contributors, so that was good. Perry, I don't know what we do with this, but I happened to do a drive-by on Arden Park, and just as I went by, saw 2 families and kids on the playground equipment. Right, so, you know, clearly we have some thought around, do we consider stronger fencing, additional signage? But it was not just kids that had climbed over, but it was parents that had said, hey kids, come on, let's go play. And it's clearly not in a situation where it's ready to have people on that equipment. So I think we kind of have a need to take some stronger action there.
And I would extend beyond just the playground. So I was creaking Labor Day, and the same thing. There were people like on some of the unsafer like mounds of dirt and like sliding things, and I on my tube I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. You might want to have your son not do that. I'm like creaking. So I'm sure he was like, okay, crazy lady, when you keep going, we'll get him back up there. But there's a dad encouraging it, and it's like clearly not a very safe situation. I was like, this could go real, because he could slide right into this water, and if I'm not here to catch him, it's not going to go well.
Yep. So I know we keep making progress there. It looks great, and hopefully we get to the finish line quickly, but just some things we need to continue to be concerned and cautious about.
That site also needs the rain to stop.
Yes, it does. Yeah, it's a very fair point. I happened to stop by Highland Park. You know, we mentioned the flooding of the nature area, but I was there for Saturday morning boys flag football. And, you know, I've coached for years at Van Valkenburg for girls flag football, but have no sons, so had never been there for the boys. Boy, what an event that was. I mean, kids just running all over the place, coaches, referees.
We're looking for more coaches.
I'm retired, unfortunately.
Just throw it out there.
But it just looked like a great use of a park facility, so I was happy to see that. Let's see. Oh, and Perry, you and I have mentioned this briefly, harking back to the rain. Park path closures due to flooding. And I know whether I've been on foot or on bicycle, I think we need to be intentional about thinking about how do we make some warning around that, right? Either the path is closed, or more directly at Bredesen, it was a case where the walking path was flooded and there were walkers on the biking path. And clearly I wasn't expecting that when I was zipping through there, and all of a sudden there's a couple walking towards me. So I don't know how we manage that, but there's a way we need to think about if these rains continue to be this way on an ongoing basis, how we warn people or direct them elsewhere. I was also at the August walk with the mayor at Centennial Lakes. Park's in great shape, and wanted to pass along as well a number of very positive comments for Tom Shirley and the team for the upkeep. People that were there walking through it, some of them lived in the area and came down to join it, others came there for the walk, but what a tremendous amount of diversity of people in Centennial Lakes, and the people that were on the walk were just very positive, right? You never quite know when you go with one of these whether people are there to complain about something or just take a little walk, but the commentary was all very positive, and I think that's a compliment to the work that's been done at Centennial Lakes. So that's all I've got.
I just have one comment. I thought they did a great job at Highlands Park, clearing out the buckthorn all around the park. You can actually see into the park now. So nice job on that. It looks a lot better.
I will just say, I mentioned I was creaking, but I hadn't been on there since the reflow, and it was seriously amazing. Not only just the clarity and how pretty it was in there, but like the water moves, like actually at a pretty rapid pace. Like if you stand up, like you're actually gonna have to hold onto your tube pretty well because it's gonna fly down. Where before, I mean, I had to get off my tube and like push it and like the whole time. It was super fun and fast and beautiful. And where they took off you used to have to walk around and all the people were upset. I mean, it was so great. I was like, thank you for all of the complaints that came through and that we actually were able to do this. It was just really, if you haven't gone down it, you know, it's not too late. It was 80 degrees today. It was really great.
Just don't get on the creek at Arden Park.
Don't get on the creek at Arden Park.
Not
And
yet.
Catch the little kids if you do.
Anyone else? Bryn?
I just had a quick question for Perry. If there were updates on the vandalisms in Utley and Bredesen, I don't know if that's in your wheelhouse or if it's with Edina PD still.
It is, but I'll give an update during the staff comments.
Okay. Perry, over to you.
Staff comments. You know what? I'll just start there. That's on the work plan. Is no news on the police side of the vandalism reports. The Utley Park still remains closed. That was the most extensive infrastructure of the damage. So the partitions for the restroom are still on order. Those are hopefully coming in. Then we can get that restroom back open. As far as the vandalism, the graffiti, the Edina Crime Prevention Fund has offered rewards for information on that. So continue to spread that if you could on your circles to get that word out. We are meeting, I think, next week on protocol for that. So more of a little bit of a heads up when rewards are going to be offered. So how we know that, how we handle, how do we communicate a little bit more between the facilities and the police department and things like that. So more to come on that, but unfortunately no news as well on that. So just a bunch of other additional updates. Arden Park, as you had mentioned, still under construction. The playground unfortunately is in while it's still under construction. We are planning to do something of kind of a soft opening for the winter for the hockey season. Through the history of the park, 1949 was the first year of hockey at Arden. So this would commemorate 70 years of hockey at the park. Cool. So kind of thinking something like that, how to engage the neighborhood back on, you know, getting the facility up and running. So the rink will go in here shortly. Some of the lighting is in. Obviously, plant landscape grading is been hampered by the weather. That's just more than I think any of the contractors have seen. So it's been a little bit frustrating on that side, I'm sure, for the residents of the neighborhood, as well as the contractors, as well as, you know, the watershed district staff managing that project. Fred Richards Park, switching gears, the eastern edge where the playground itself is going in, that container and site work is primarily done. We are awaiting arrival of the playground equipment, which hopefully we get a date soon here. We'd like to still kind of have some type of opening celebration there yet this fall. We know it's getting close because we got the repair kit. That's kind of always the signal. You get the repair kit and then they kind of send you a date shortly thereafter. But the shelter itself will probably be more towards October itself. So the plan is to get the park up and running, playground equipment, at least get some use out of it. The shelter installation will likely happen during the week. School's in session. We'll have a little bit more flexibility on closing the park for a couple of days to get that installed. Let's see. For out at Braemar Arena, they finished up the Beauty League for the summer. Just a couple of quick stats on that. About 16,000 people attended all of those games. And Chad kind of put together some numbers out there. 1,700 sodas, 1,500 bags of popcorn, 58 NHL players went through the facility this year. In the Beauty League, did a lot of the promotions themselves. It's kind of their thing. About 9 million Twitter impressions that they got out of the year. So the East Rink, we've got that shut down for maintenance right now, kind of the annual side of things. Removing permafrost. So actually melting the ice and then adding a little bit of heat to try to get the permafrost out because we're getting a little bit of heaving. So interesting, adding heat to an arena. You don't hear that often. Just to the east, Braemar Golf, obviously, for those that have been there, just a great season. And even with the weather that we've had, kind of a struggle. 18,500 18-hole rounds, 13,009 hole rounds on the championship course alone this year. So 18,800 rounds on the Academy course. And I think the biggest thing, the investment in the driving range, 42,000 range buckets sold. So quite an impressive year for that opening. Aquatic Center, same type of thing, you know, kind of a struggling year with the weather. It was always cool, always raining or a threat of raining. You know, I think what we learned is a lot of people tried to make their plans based on the weather. Whether it came true or not, nope, we think it's going to rain, we're not going there. But still, we had 39,000 daily admissions, so quite on par with where some of our previous years were, and 45,000 member check-ins. That the member check-in piece is up 23%. So those that were buying season passes came quite a bit more. So that's good. They're getting value out of that, and then we're getting those visits. As you had mentioned, Fall Into the Arts was this weekend. That's the joint program with the Edina Crime Prevention Fund, kind of as their fundraiser. Saturday, great day, great turnout, and I think people planned based on what the forecast was. Sunday was a little bit lower, but artists were there. They looked a little bit cold, a little bit wet, but there were still people there. And thank you for the comments on Centennial Lakes. If you remember during our meeting in August, Tom kind of explained that a portion of that lawn bowling area, they're converting to the Scottish putting. If you drive by or if you've been out there, that's kind of taking shape. The mounds are starting to grow, so that'll be online again for starting of the next year, but it's already kind of taking shape. If you haven't received any of the updates, there's a revised version of the Park Finder on the city's website. It's a revamp of the prior version, hopefully a little bit easier to use maybe, to try to find some things. You can drill down to, are you looking for a certain activity, or what is at a park near you? So you can kind of search a couple of different ways of what's out there. And then also new is some text notifications. So you can currently sign up for email subscriptions on all things, but now you can get text messages if that's easier for you, related to the facilities or field and facility closures. That's kind of the primary purpose we're looking at, is weather closures to get a little bit more specific. Are you in softball? Are you in football? What are you in, and what do we need to close for you? And then also some event information. And the last piece, you had mentioned the Walk with the Mayor at Centennial Lakes. The one at Roslyn in September had been moved up a week. That is now canceled due to a scheduling conflict. So the next one will be October 19th at Arden Park, if you're interested. So, yeah, they got a lot of work to do yet. So, but if you've been out there, paths are coming in. Obviously, the bridges have been set. The water detention basins have all been planted. Trees started coming in. Some of those didn't look so good, so those will have to be redone. Work is really accelerating on the shelter building itself. If you've been out there, so now like drywall's going in, windows, doors are coming in. So hopefully that gets some good clear weather to make some progress. So, but, and then let's see what else. We had our city council updates of some of the things that were approved on there. And then just a reminder, October, we're meeting on Monday, Monday the 7th, not on your normal Tuesday. So
Good
we'll remind
reminder.
you again of that next time.
Janet will keep us straight.
7th, October 7th,
So we'll be the first.
the first Monday in October.
Yep. Any last minute comments? If no, I'll take a motion to close, adjourn. Second, we're adjourned. No opportunity to say no. No opportunity.
What's that? Yeah.